We owe much of our suffering to our grandparents and parents because they were the team that raised us during our onboarding on Earth. The first 7 years of our life that were formative for our thinking and behavior. What did our grandparents do? Well, they agreed to take part in a military-inspired mind control program that has a ripple effect in our society to this day. Also, they raised the parents that raised us. Remember that our grandparents, and for some generations your parents, lived in the years following the Second World War when the big technological boom happened and TV made its way to every living room. And what is TV? The ultimate propaganda machine, and the propaganda happens while you're being entertained. It's smart. But a lot more happened after the two big wars. I'm talking about the Monarch Mind Control Project and the MK Ultra Mind Control Project. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the Monarch Mind Control Project and how I escaped from the conditioning, which really is the ultimate mission impossible for any human being. The Monarch Mind Control Project creates slaves undetectably. You're groomed and prepared to be a slave since the day you were born, exposed to methods of hypnosis and torture that condition your subconscious mind to think and act in a specific way in order to avoid pain and punishment. I was essentially trained to be a machine that performs and shows no emotions, which is quite effective when it comes to training soldiers, right? And quite brutal when it comes to raising children, which is why we've got so much inner child healing to face today. When I was a child, I would not be able to express basic needs like feeling hungry or feeling cold. I would not be able to speak, use my voice, and form my own opinions to some degree. I would sit in one place and always guard my back, which is one way to develop extreme pattern recognition skills. Your survival depends on them. I even remember apologizing for crying in front of my own mother around the age of 6 or 7 because I knew in an instant I had broken character and there would be consequences. For one, how fucked up is that when it comes to being a child? But also, how awesome is it that children can have such high level of self-awareness? And I know that I'm not the only one that's gone through this kind of experience growing up. I would be frozen in my own body without actually being in control of my own body. Much like one of the dolls in Westworld. That's what the Monarch Mind Control Programming does to you. It robs you of your own sense of identity and your self-worth so that you can always be codependent on others, specifically abusers and manipulators. And the voices of gaslighting and narcissism around me would always be, what's wrong with her? There's something wrong with this child. Because that's how we label sensitive children who need love. In a world that wants to keep our hearts closed, broken, unable to feel the good and the bad. What's wrong with the world? I ask back, now that I've reclaimed my voice. We live in a world where we're performing 24/7. The greater our performance, the higher our evaluation. Which explains why we have a culture of burnout, mental health issues, and perfectionism. We're all trained to forget about our emotions, that our emotions are bad. This is embedded in your consciousness, or rather in your subconscious mind. You don't have a clue about any of this unless or until God intervenes. Hi, I'm Stella, writer and light worker, here to inspire positive change. I experienced my first spiritual awakening as a child. I must have been around 5, but I remember this moment vividly. I was sitting on the floor, suddenly connected to my higher self or source, thinking to myself, what is the meaning of all of this, of life? And a little voice replied back to me, it's okay, you understand one day. And over the years, I've listened to this voice. When it led me to foreign countries, told me to cut off people from my life, guided me to read books and watch movies, inspired me to create and channel my pain into art. And this voice led me to the Monarch Mind Control Project PDF earlier this year, when it was time for me to wake up and step into my purpose, into my higher calling. This was a time of great revelation because my spiritual gifts were coming online. I started having prophetic dreams, and in those dreams, I was revealed a lot about the people in my life. I started receiving downloads from the universe, from God, from my higher self about what all of this is, what the future looks like if we don't take action today, and what next steps I needed to take in order to complete my soul purpose. One of the biggest aha moments of my life came when I realized that trauma is not real because none of this is real. We are so attached to our bodies, our homes, our cars, our possessions, because we're conditioned to be defined and limited by the 3D world around us, when there's so much more to explore and become. And it's quite interesting that the Monarch Mind Control Programming uses words and images from the tarot cards to create the conditioning. High Priestess, Hierophant, Emperor, Empress, to name a few. Whoever designed this mind control strategy really wanted to point a middle finger to spirituality. And ironically, the best way to get out of the Monarch Mind Control Programming is precisely through tarot cards. Getting to know them, defining your own messaging, and spinning out of the program. Reclaiming your voice, your emotions, your power. Here's something important to know about the Monarch Mind Control Programming. There are many sectors of the current world involved in it. Medicine is creating and selling pills to keep our immune system, intuition, and psychic abilities down. Schools are used as the places to brainwash and occasionally abuse children to keep them spiritually asleep. Later on, universities make sure that you never reach your potential, so that they can plug your consciousness into a corporate or office job. Military tactics are used with your local police and other agents of surveillance. And these military tactics are occasionally very spiritually advanced. Astral projection is not just something that you see in the movies. The CIA have already released documents that show how they're using it. Why is it impossible to leave the Monarch Mind Control Programming? Well, for one, you don't know what's going on. Your memories are consistently erased, and your mind is constantly tampered with so that even if you do remember, you don't actually speak about what you remember. Or if you choose to speak, you kind of sound like a madman. Who's gonna believe this spiritual hippie? And the truth is quite sinister. Take a look at this clip from The Butterfly Effect. It captures what the Monarch Mind Control Programming looks like.
In this part of the story, Robin Hood has just married Maid Marian. And they have to kiss and stuff, like the grown-ups do. So, take off your clothes, Kaylee. Come on, just like when we take a bath. Don't make a big deal out of it. You too, Evan. Come on, let's go. Let's go. We're making a movie here.
What time is it?
It's time for you to do what I tell you to do.
Wrong answer, fuckbag. This is the very moment of your reckoning. In the next 30 seconds, you're gonna open up one of two doors. The first door will forever traumatize your own flesh and blood.
What's happening? How are you doing this?
It'll change your daughter from a beautiful child into an empty shell whose only concept of trust was betrayed by her own sick pedophile father. Ultimately, it'll lead to her suicide. Nice work, Daddy.
Who are you?
Let's just say you're being closely watched, George. Your other option is to treat Kaylee like a loving father treats his daughter. Sound okay to you, Papa?
Yes.
If your childhood memories are missing, I'm sorry, but this is probably what happened to you. But understand, the fact that you're alive and watching this video means that you've got the strength, the willpower, and the intellect to overcome anything. Bella Mackey's How to Kill Your Family is quite a cathartic read that is inspired by the shared experiences we all have from the Monarch Mind Control Programming. Ultimately, this is not the fault of those that have done bad things to you. There are people who designed this mind control program to corrupt the world that we live in. And the programming is running by itself at this point, even if there are still some appointed figures around the world to make sure that the programming is running smoothly. The Monarch Mind Control Project explains why we live in a world full of child pornography, pedophiles, child trafficking, and inner child trauma. And it's pointless to keep closing our eyes to the truth. It's time to face the truth so we can heal from it. Reason number 2, it's impossible to leave the monarch mind control system. There's bribery involved. One of the ways to keep you stuck in the program, especially if you're a handler that's done bad things to other people, if you don't control your slave, we will release your sex tape. And this is most likely a sex tape with a child because the monarch mind control victims are groomed since they're babies. If you don't give us money, we will release your sex tape. And this bribery goes on forever because once you're in the system, there's almost no way to leave. This Black Mirror episode shows what the bribery looks like. Many people were bothered by this episode. Well, the truth will piss you off, but it will set you free. Isn't it ironic that people are bothered by the truth, but they put up with all of this injustice? This truly is the silence of the lambs. And the wolves aren't even that scary. At this point, they're tired, and their days are numbered. Speak up and expose the wolves in your life, knowing that this is not about them. It's about you taking back your power, your voice, your freedom. Every monarch slave has many handlers and many assignments along the way. And some slaves can be programmed to self-destruct. Mental health issues are sometimes triggered on purpose in individuals, especially when they're at risk of leaving the system. My programming was hardcore, and just because I've been smiling my way through life doesn't mean I've not fought many battles with wolves and giants. Yet, here I am, telling my story. The scars you see on my face, they're not random either. They're markings. Every sinister code and project has some sort of humiliation process. And this was one way to mark me as damaged goods. But I'd like to think of them as my escape ticket. Because there are plenty other boys and girls, men and women around the world who do not get away with just scars. Those trafficked, sold into forced labor, driven to frenzy, or destroyed before their time. How did I get out of the monarch mind control programming? Well, for one, don't underestimate a creative soul with a journalism degree and a spiritual calling. But there are 3 specific things that helped me. 1, music and movies. I was always attracted by the latest music in movies, and now I know why. The old movies and music were used for mind control hypnosis to get you back into the alpha state, or the lower states of frequency of consciousness where you can be easily manipulated. This was my higher self guiding me to self-recondition myself back to remembering who I am and why I came here. I owe much of my remembrance to DJs like MK, Flume, and Diplo. Your music saved me in a world that wanted to keep me asleep. Thank you. Number 2, creating some more. Every time I had an idea or a vision, I wrote it down, even if I didn't know what it meant or how it connected. When I discovered the Monarch Mind Control Project PDF earlier this year, I knew right away this is exactly what happened to me. That's the thing with mind control. Some of the memories are missing or blocked. They're all stored in your consciousness, and you're gonna have access to all of them at the end of your lifetime. But while you're playing the game of life, you need to rely on what's revealed to you in the present moment. This much I know from the Matrix series by Val Valerian. So when I discovered this PDF, I thought, might as well see what I've been writing about all of these years. And I discovered that they were all messages to me from my higher self. Messages of encouragement, messages of support, messages with clues and guidance, messages that revealed the truth when it was inconceivable at the time. And this is why journaling works. You're allowing your higher self to be channeled through you so that you can understand yourself better. What's blocking you emotionally, what you're unable to see mentally, what needs to be addressed as soon as possible, who needs your help. We are playing the game of life together after all. Number 3, trust. The secret to remembering who you are and getting in alignment with your most authentic self is trust. You need to trust the unknown. You need to trust the process, the universe, your higher self, your current self. God works in mysterious ways, but the world we live in today is not the world God intended for us. It's the result of all of the corruption on the physical plane and on the spiritual plane. To awaken spiritually is to understand your responsibility of leading the way forward. If you awaken and begin to manipulate others because you can see things that they cannot, there are consequences. The world we live in today is designed by the so-called elites. They awoke many years ago and decided to change the rules because it fit their agenda. But the elites are not gods. In fact, they couldn't be further from gods. If you read the Matrix series by Val Valerian, you start to see what's underneath are human avatars. The aliens that multiple governments are trying to scare us with are actually among us. Some might say we are the aliens. None of us knows who or what our individual consciousness belongs to, because we're all in the game of life and we're not meant to know. What we're supposed to do in our lifetime on Earth is learn, grow, collaborate, co-create, love. Love is the ultimate form of existence on Earth. Love is something that doesn't exist anywhere else. And it's the most powerful form of magic because love heals all wounds. Spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and even physically. Heal Your Body by Louise Hay is one example of the healing powers of love. Self-love is the master key to unlocking your potential because love transforms any old, dark energy into light, creative energy bursting with life. That's alchemy. You are an alchemist. All you need to do is love, follow your heart, and do what brings you joy. That's you practicing alchemy by transforming the negative energy of the current world into ideas, inspiration, and innovation. At the end of the day, none of us knows how much time we have on Earth in our current human avatar. When you awaken spiritually, you're given the opportunity to embody your higher self on Earth and create positive change for the future generations. The Mass Awakening has begun. You start spinning out of the 3D programming and the Monarch mind control programming, which means you will start to see people in your life in a different light. It's important to forgive them because they didn't know better. And if they did, and they still chose to hurt you, they will face their own karma in their own time. There's a spiritual core that oversees all that goes on Earth and in the universe. When you awaken spiritually, do not seek revenge. Instead, transmute the energy of pain, anger, grief, guilt, and shame, and accept all the suffering that you've gone through as part of your soul's purification on the path to enlightenment. You're here to learn and grow, to experience the full spectrum of emotions before you fully fall in love with life, with the world, with yourself. Self-love is the master key, and spiritual ascension is the way to transcend from the corrupted version of this game. The Monarch Mind Control Project might have had your soul enslaved for years, but your soul is still there, waiting for you to reconnect with it and claim back your power. It's time to kick the abusers and bullies out of the game and restore heaven on earth.